Hello, everyone. And today we are joined for the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War back in 1982. I'm joined by Mel White, who served on the Canberra in that period in history. So I've got some questions for Mel about his time on the Canberra and his time in the Royal Navy. I'm just delighted to have him here with us. And I think I'll start by asking the first question. What was your role in the Royal Navy at the time of the Falklands invasion?
I was I was an operating theatre technician, as they were called then, working in a surgical support team, and this surgical support team normally would deploy with 3 Commando Brigade, and the team that I was part of came from the Royal Naval Hospital in Plymouth. And as I said, there were 2 Royal Naval surgical support teams, both of them in a time of conflict would deploy with 3 Commando Brigade. So that's why we actually were deployed down to the Falklands.
Okay. So the second question, when did you find out that you were being mobilized for the task force?
Right, well, it's strange, actually. It's a good question, that, because it's the one thing out of the whole adventure, if you like, which is really so clear, and it's strange.
Right.
We were all on standby, obviously, from the very time that the conflict looked like it might happen. Everybody was on standby. Those that would have gone down, were picked to gone down, were on standby. But it was really strange in that, as I say, it's 40 years since it happened. But I know the exact time and location when I heard I was going to deploy down on the Canberra, and I was playing football.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was playing football in a little place called Southhampton, which is the other side of Plymouth, for a team that I play for every Sunday. And we're in the first half, and coming over towards the pitch, there was 2 policemen, and the 2 policemen came onto the side of the pitch, and they shouted, "MT1 White," and that was my rank at the time, was an MT1, MT1 White, and the game stopped. The referee blew his whistle, and I put my hand up. I ran over to them and said, "You're required. You're needed at the rush, back at the hospital, and the rest is history." And that's what happened. And then I think we had something like a week to get the sort of the stuff together, get people together before we actually deployed.
Wow.
Yeah, strange, isn't it? It is.
Yeah,
strange.
it is. Yeah, I hope you weren't.
But I can still picture the pitch. I can picture who we were playing. It's so.
I hope you weren't the star striker or the key playmaker.
No.
Oh, it's brilliant. That's really brilliant. So yeah, leads into question 3. How did you feel about going to war on a cruise ship?
Well, it's not as strange as it sounds for 3 Commando Brigade, because every year 3 Commando Brigade used to deploy to Norway to play Arctic war games, and on many occasions the brigade used civilian ferries to take the troops over, and they the term for them was ships taken up from trade, or stuffed, as they were called. And so, but as we got closer, and things hotted up on this occasion, then clearly the guys did start to get a little bit concerned, especially as they didn't have any defense capability at all. So it was a bit strange also, because many of the civilian crew actually deployed with us on board. So we had civilian stewards were still on board, who were serving on table. On the medical organisation, we had the two of the ship's doctors. They deployed with us, and one of them, a lady surgeon, came with us. And of course, she was very useful, as it turned out, because we only had 2 surgeons within 2 service surgeons within the team. So the extra surgeon became very useful to us.
Yeah. So tell me about life on board the ship. What was what was it like?
I think you have to appreciate that when we left Southampton, the political dialogue was still going on.
Yeah.
And so I suppose to a great extent, we all felt that that nothing was going to happen. And I suppose for the first couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, it was a bit of a holiday atmosphere.
Yeah.
Although the Royal Marines and the paras on board was doing a lot of training, really non-stop on the way down. Once we stopped over at Ascension Island, we were there for about a week to take on stores and do some live firing ashore and that sort of thing. And then each night we had to sail. We couldn't stay at anchor because there was supposedly an Argentinian submarine threat. And so every night while we were there, we had to go out to sea, sail around a bit, and take sort of avoiding actions. As we got further down towards the Falklands, the mood changed drastically. And as the diplomatic effort looked like it was going to fail, it became more obvious that we were actually going to go all the way down to the Falklands and retake them. And I think the turning point from my perspective, and from the guys' perspective, was that halfway down between the Ascension Islands and the Falkland Islands, we had to bleed the troops because we needed a supply of blood.
Wow. Because
it was obvious that we weren't going to get supplies down there, especially blood. So we bled the Royal Marines and the paras, and we spent 3 days with them on stretchers, taking pints of blood off of them. And I think at that stage, then, looking at the guys, just by looking at the faces of the troops, you could see that at that point they realized that things were getting real, and then it was going to happen. And until then, there was a bit of social life on board. You know, the bars were still open, or some of the bars were still open. After that point, when we started to near the island, that all stopped. We had to darken ship at night. So every night we had to put these blinds up and blackouts because of the Argentinian air threat. And the food became a lot more bland because there wasn't any resupply. So we were on sort of mashed spuds rather than roast potatoes, if you like. And we're all given Geneva Convention cards, and these are the cards that the forces always carry in the event that they got captured and that sort of thing. So I think, and mail ceased as well. We weren't allowed to send any mail, obviously, to prevent any because the plans were starting to get a lot more detailed then, and there was lots of briefings going on. So the last thing that they wanted was for any sort of any idea of how it was going to happen to get back to Argentina. So all mail stopped.
Of course.
And so it became very clear at that stage that it was going to happen, and I think we'd gone beyond the point of no return. That's how our life on board the Canberra changed quite drastically.
Yeah. So I think the next question, it leads in perfectly. What was the atmosphere on board, and how was it when you went into San Carlos?
Right, so as we got closer to the Falklands, we met up with many more ships, escort ships, and it was really pretty ironic that on the day that we actually came very close to the Falklands, the fog came down. It was really foggy, and it was almost like somebody up there was looking after us, because clearly the fog and the conditions at sea prevented any Argentinian air attack. And so the run down to the Falklands was very quiet. And basically what happened, the plan was that we were going to do a diversionary run towards Stanley. And so the whole fleet headed towards Stanley to make the Argentinians think that we were going to take Stanley. And then the whole fleet switched around and went back round into San Carlos. There was considerable cross-decking took place before then, so lots of troops had to be in the right place at the right time. So we had lots of guys on the Canberra who transferred to other ships, so that the landing could be done in accordance with the plan. And we, at that point, we decided we would cross-deck one of the surgical teams onto another ship and to go ashore with the landings to support the beachhead, and that's what happened. One of the teams went across. The one thing that sticks in my mind about Carlos was how quiet it was when we actually entered the water, and it was early in the morning. I know 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, something like that, and it was absolutely, you could hear if you drop something over the side of the ship, and it's a big ship, Canberra, and there was no noise at all. It was all darkened ship, and there was no noise at all. What happened then? It sticks in my mind, and I can hear it and see it, and that is that on Fanning Head, which was a head before we went into Carlos. At Fanning Head, there was supposedly a company of Argentinians, and it was important that they took that company out because that overlooked San Carlos, and clearly when we started to anchor, they could open up with heavy weapons and so forth. So there was I think there was a section of special, I think it was 3 SBS. They were ordered. They were ordered to take that position out. And from the bay, you had a really perfect sight of that. And all I remember is hearing HMS Antrim firing its guns onto Fanning Head, and actually over Fanning Head, you could see the tracer going.
Oh wow!
Going back and forth, and it was an absolute. It was an amazing thing. The ships then anchored. The ships then anchored in Carlos, just about as daylight appeared. Still quiet. No activity at all from the Argentinians, and at that point, I think people were going around feeling fairly confident and a bit of disbelief, because I think we all thought that we'd done it without any sort of resistance at all.
Yeah, and
then that changed very quickly when the first air attack came in, and then from then on, between about 3 o'clock and between about 10 o'clock in the morning and maybe 4 or 5 o'clock at night, there were 17 sorties came in into Carlos, and so it became very, very lively, and a few of the ships got hit and went down the Ardent and so forth.
You see the footage. I watched the Task Force South documentary that the BBC made. You see all the Skyhawks coming in, the near misses.
And you could. I remember standing on the outer deck with and the guy that I was serving with. He had and I lost the tape actually, but he had a tape recorder, and he put this tape. He put this tape, one of these old-fashioned tape recorders, and he put this tape recorder on the deck. And we went back in because we were doing some work at that point. At that point in the day, we were taking on quite a few casualties. Most of them were Argentinian casualties. But then, as things got a little bit more lively, of course, we took on a lot of the casualties from the ships. The Ardent survivors came on board and that sort of thing. So we left this tape recorder on the upper deck, and then when things quietened down after when darkness fell, we went and recovered this tape recorder, and it was one of the old-fashioned tapes. Put it in, and you could hear everything. You could hear the ship's guns going off. We even heard a missile, must have been a sea-to-air missile, went off very close to the Canberra, and you could hear you could hear that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we lost the tape. Or we think somebody actually managed to get their hands on it. What happened then was, once we got all the troops ashore, darkness fell, and the command decision was that the Canberra was going to sail out to an area at sea called the Tralar, which was a protected box further out at sea, and it was guarded by some of the frigates. And that's where the Canberra went, because they felt that the following day it probably wasn't going to survive. It was very lucky not to get hit, quite honestly. A massive big white ship, and so they weren't going to take that risk. Well, we sailed off out to sea and stayed in the Tralar and then we came back in, I think, on one more occasion, and then we were dispatched to South Georgia to pick up five brigade that had just that had come in to resupply and so forth. So it was quite lively that day, and I always remember not being able to operate because the place we'd chosen for the operating theatre was in a place on the Canberra called the Crow's Nest Bar. But the problem was the Crow's Nest Bar was just a sort of like it was just full of glass basically, and we managed to put these carpets up. So
I think I've seen a picture of it.
So if the glass did get shattered, but we couldn't do any operating, so we had, because we just couldn't. Every time we started to operate, an air attack came in. So what we had to do was to just keep resourcing. At that point, as I say, most of the casualties were Argentinian, but we couldn't do any operating. But as soon as we left Carlos and went out to the trawler, we spent the whole rest of that night and the next day, I think, doing some surgery before we had to go back down to South Georgia.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask quickly before we do the next question. So when I was doing my research, watching the Task Force South documentary, there's to me, it's funny. But they start, when the Argentine prisoners start coming aboard, they start using P&O luggage tags to document them. Did you ever use anything like that from the ship, like repurpose anything? I just think that's really ingenious.
What, to you mean to sort of tag them with names?
Yeah.
Do you
remember did you do anything like that yourself? Or?
No, we didn't. I didn't. I was. We were always too busy, sort of operating and so forth. But I do remember the one thing I remember from the Argentinian prisoners was that they were in a terrible state and terrible. And I remember we had to sort of we had to delouse them. So so when they came on board, they would queue up, and then they'd get sort of checked over by the medics just to make sure most of them were sort of in a terrible state. You know, they obviously hadn't had any sort of washing or anything like that. But I remember smelling something as we were going along the line, and it was a horrible smell. It actually smelled because previously I'd smelled what gangrene smells like, and and I said to the guy, I said, it smells like gangrene. That's a gangrene smell. Anyway, we got a bit closer, and one of the Argentine casualties, it was there, and we said, open your kit bag. Open the kit bag, and there was a sheep in there. There was half a sheep in there.
Oh my!
Yeah, and full of maggots, and I think that's how they were living towards the end. The Argentinians, they hadn't got any supply because there was a blockade going on. So they hadn't got any food supply, and they were just living really hand to mouth, basically.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's wow.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So my last question. I mean, what did it feel like when you finally made it back to Southampton on the 11th of July, 82?
Right. So I often get asked that question because everybody sees the news clips and sees all the sort of the
celebrations.
Yeah, celebrations. Loads of helicopters, loads of ships. When we came up Channel. We had a thing called Up Channel Night, which is like a naval traditional thing. When you go up Channel, you have a celebration. There was lots of things going on. People were drinking. We managed to get drink on board. Prince Charles came on board on the morning of when we entered up the Solent. So a lot of people say, what was the atmosphere like? And I think I speak for a lot of the guys in that I think most guys just wanted to get home.
Of course,
they just felt that they just wanted to sort of escape from the journalist questions, which were continuous, all looking for contentious stuff.
Looking for a story.
For a story. So they were fed up with the questions fed up with the cameras being clicked all over the place. The Land of Hope and Glory must have been played about 5,000 times, and that's all we heard. So I think most people, although they appreciated, the sort of the public coming out and whatever. Most people, I think, just wanted to sort of get home with their families, have a quiet time to reflect on what had actually took place. And of course, loads of guys never made it home, which is why I think the 40th anniversary really is so important. And it's more than anything, I think it's just a time to remember those guys that didn't make it.
Of course, yeah, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah,
Really, that's
yeah.
why I'm making these series of videos, because I think I want to document it in the best I can. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And thank you very much for
That's all right, Robbie.
answering my questions.
Yeah, that's all right.
And yeah, I want to just thanks Mel for coming on the channel and sharing his experiences. So
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.